Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today needs no introduction. He's New Brunswick's most beloved comedian, James Mullinger. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'm so excited. It's my first time in the studio itself.
Where the magic happens.
The magic literally happens. Obviously, like most people, I've been watching you so regularly over the last couple of years, more so than ever these last couple of years. So it's genuinely a dream come true to be here.
Thank you so much. It's a dream come true for me to have you here. Can you tell me, let's start off by talking about a memoir that you just released, Brit Happens, or Living the Canadian Dream. The first sentence of the book is, "Perhaps I was always meant to be Canadian."
Yeah.
Why was that sentence important for you to be the first? And I know it came at an important time in your Canadian dream, so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was the first instance that I wrote for the book as a Canadian. It was one of the reasons that it was so important. But it was something that I think while you're writing a memoir, you of course start thinking a lot about your life and how you've got to the place you're at in your life, and by that I mean kind of, you know, mentally and emotionally as well as geographically. But I think to my mind it was just an interesting thing that I obviously moved here for numerous reasons, but over the kind of last 8 years of living and working in this country and bringing up my family here, I've grown to love the place so much, and I basically put forward, you know, a few theories as to why I believe this is essentially, the book is a kind of mediation on home and the concept of home. And while obviously, you know, London is the place I was born and the place I lived for many years, and indeed had many happy times and have happy times when I go back, I believe that you can choose your home, and to me Canada is my natural home, just from the way that people are. Everything about this place and the way that the people are is what I relate to.
Obviously, when you move here from somewhere else, you're able to pick up on the things that people maybe don't notice they do, that are maritime habits. And obviously, one of the chapters of your book is a joke that you're extremely famous for. It's actually, I was mentioning this to you before we started filming, it's how I got to know you, was through Maritime Directions. So can you tell me a little bit about how Maritime Directions, I'm pretty sure everyone at home knows them, but how they came to be?
Well yes. The bit itself, for anyone that doesn't know it, is obviously concerns the fact that when people give directions in the Maritimes, they never use local landmarks. They give directions based on where things used to be. So, I mean, I was in Moncton last week trying to find the Atlantic Lotto building. I asked someone where it was, and literally, I mean, again, they weren't doing it to be funny. They didn't know where it was. They said, it's where Woolco used to be. Now, I mean, I believe I sound like I'm not from here. What makes them think that I would have any idea? You literally need a degree in failed Canadian businesses to find your way around. I mean, here in St. Andrews on Water Street is a perfect example. You know, you can struggle up and down trying to find Save Easy. Save Easy has not been there for 10 years. It's Joey's independent grocer. Joey does a wonderful job, but still everyone calls it Save Easy. What's Joey got to do to get some recognition around here? And it's a wonderful thing. That people are willing to kind of laugh at this. We all do it. I now think that I've been here long enough that I'm now doing it. Someone asked me where H&M was. I mean, the only way to describe it is it's where Target used to be. There's all of these. So the joke became, it started off as a stand-up routine, then I did it as a little video, and yes, I never expected it to take off how it did. I would say more so than any routine I've ever done. I would say it's got me work, and people have traveled from, you know, all over to come to shows, and they said that's how they, and to this day, like if someone walks up to me in the street, if they catch eyes with me and they come up and they go, oh, I know instantly it's gonna be, oh, I was giving someone directions last week and I accidentally said it's where Zeller's used to be, and I thought of you, and I absolutely love it. I also have, I mean, one of the funniest things, of course, you know, well, I'd say one of the funniest things during the pandemic, one of the few things that's funny about was both the testing stations and indeed the vaccination stations, when the government sent out their listings. I got sent one of those every day because it always said, you know, old Zeller's building, old Kent building, old post office, old train station. So I kind of think, you know, if official government documents are saying this, then it is officially a thing. But the story that I tell in the book, which I've never really, pardon me, I've never really told before, is the fact that it was actually my wife's idea. I had just done Harbour Station the first time in 2016, and a few days after the gig said to her, like, that 100 minutes of stand-up that I just did, I basically need to burn all those jokes. Like, too many people have seen them. A, there was 5,000 people in the room. B, we filmed it for a special. It's going on CBC and Prime. Like, we can't have all those. I can't do those jokes again. So I need to basically go get on the road, start workshopping. And she said, well, have you ever thought about doing a joke about the way that people give directions and say where things used to be? And I said, that doesn't sound very funny. I don't see how that's funny. And then a radio ad came on, and she said, look, listen. And this ad said, you know, Stu's Cleaning Services. We're located where Downey Ford used to be. No address, no phone number, just... And still I thought, I don't really see how it's funny. And then one night she was at a show. I was doing a work in progress show. And because she was there, I thought, so she stops banging on about this directions joke, I'll just do it so she can see it's not funny. So I did it, brought the house down, ripped the roof off, and I went, oh, maybe she was right. And a lot of the jokes that, I mean, the joke that I do about the wonderful Robert and Catherine who own the St. Stephen Pitter Pit, the headline was St. Stephen couple hopes to open Pitter Pit. That was one that Pam pulled out of the paper and said, there's something funny in that. And I was like, oh. So, you know, I like to give credit where credit's due. So really, the joke I'm best known for isn't even mine, it's my wife's. And then most of my other jokes actually just stem from things that people email me. Really, I'm just a ventriloquist repeating funny things that New Brunswickers have told me.
I will say we're working on an ad right now for St. Stephen Dental Center, and they are in the old NW, and I'm trying not to say that in the commercial is really hard.
But yeah, you have to, because it's the best way that people know the address, right? And no, I love how that's taken off. And yeah, so I guess to people watching, if you see me, don't think for 1 second that I don't want to hear, because I do, I love it. There's a sign on McAllister Drive in St. John for Jojo's Car Wash, and it just has an arrow, and it says Old Co-op. And I've literally been sent that picture hundreds of times, like every single different angle, always taken worryingly by a driver in a moving car. That's St. John drivers for you. But I would say there's more pictures of that sign in my inbox than there are of most crime scenes.
You opened the book with a quote, and it was, I love the quote, a border agent that told Mike Myers, famous Canadian comedian,
yes,
his father who moved to Canada from Liverpool, he says, you can't change Canada, Canada changes you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know in what ways that's true for you. Obviously you're beautiful at observing the funny things about being here, but in what ways has this sort of shaped who you've become?
I think it's definitely made me, I mean, I know that living here has made me a happier person. I think when people are happier, they tend to be better people. And I think, you know, I mean, certainly the big city mindset, and this isn't to disparage people in big cities, but so I guess I can only speak from my own experience. Living in a big city like London, where, you know, there is not really a sense of community, people don't know their neighbours, they don't look out for each other, it can make you somewhat selfish. You can, a good example being, you know, if someone falls over in the street, everyone just keeps walking. You know, I guess it comes back to the kind of the Good Samaritan thing, and I guess part, you know, and again, I kind of joke about this in Mac, that part of what makes us be so nice in the Maritimes is you kind of almost have to be, because, you know, a good example is people will, you know, push and shove each other on the tube trains, on the buses, and get into screaming matches, and they could be perfectly respectable people, and they know they can do that because there's not going to be any comeback on that. Whereas here, you know, like, you think twice before giving someone the finger at a junction, because chances are they're going to be the next person coming into the studio that morning, or you're going to bump into the honeybeans, or it's the mayor, you know. So, you know, you literally, it forces us to be nicer. I mean, I learned this very quickly when I had a bad experience with a contractor sat down at a dinner table that night. We'd had a bad experience that day, started complaining. It turned out that his sister was sitting at the table with us, you know. And so part of it is that kind of natural, organic thing, I think, of forcing people to be nice. But to answer your question, I would say it changed me in that I've definitely become a happier person. I think I've become a better person, certainly more community-minded because of it. Better parent, by default better community. I mean, I think, you know, the myth of the tortured artist is so wrong, because in my mind, you know, I'm far more productive when I'm happier, when I'm, you know, I'm healthier, all of those things. And so I feel like that's what Canada did, and I don't think I was ever going to be that person living in England. I would say that for most of my life I was a fairly cynical person. and thought that I was too busy to help others, and I was burnt out, stressed, physically unfit, mentally unfit, all of those things. So I would say that they say there isn't a geographical solution for an emotional problem. I say there is if you move to New Brunswick.
You've definitely become a favorite of other comedians from the Maritimes too. I look at the reviews of your book, my favorite being Mary Walsh's from 22 Minutes. She said, "I don't even like British people, but I love James Mullinger and I love Brit Happens." Can you tell us a little bit about what the comedy scene is like in the Maritimes? I know to some people it might seem like the most unlikely place to move, and yet you've made this work.
Good question, and I guess some like me. I mean, there's certainly plenty of comedians in the Maritimes that hate me, but I guess the successful ones like me, which is a good sign. It's been interesting getting to know people like, you know, Jonathan Torrance, Mary Walsh, you know, Rick Mercer, obviously Ron James kind of splits his time, but also, you know, is of course from Nova Scotia and still has a home here. Because they all have an intrinsic love of this place. They've all done it on their own terms. And I think that's the thing that you almost have to do as any kind of, you know, performing artist or anyone in the public eye in this region where there isn't a built-in system. So you kind of carve your own path, and so that's what I found so interesting when meeting and becoming friends with people like, you know, Mary Walsh and Jonathan Torrance, where, you know, you do it all yourself. You know, and that's not to say you don't have help and an incredible support network, but what there isn't is this kind of built-in system whereby, you know, for example, I imagine if you, you know, I know when you in London, it's like, okay, well, here's how it works. You've got to do open spots for 3 years, then you do the Comedy Store, and then when you headline in the Comedy Store, then you can maybe get on a panel show, and then there's this system. You know, and again, I mean, even in Canada, there's a system where people think, you know, you have to do Just for Laughs, and you have to play Yuck Yucks, and you have to do all of these things. And I'm not disparaging those things or that journey. But here, we don't have those things. So here, you treat the business the same way a plumber treats their business, which is you arrive in town, and you try and do good work, and if people like it, they spread the word. And there's a burgeoning. You know, I guess, I don't know if underground's the right word, but there is a burgeoning comedy scene within New Brunswick and across the Maritimes, in that, like, you know, Halifax has some of the best comedians in the country right now. I was there doing Halifax Yuck Yucks the other week, working with some amazing comedians. Sarah McClellan, an absolutely hilarious comedian, opened for me. She was absolutely, you know, top notch. Travis Lindsay, Dan Hendrick, and there's so many amazing, Claire Belford, there's so many amazing comedians, you know, that I would say that the Maritimes is punching well above its weight in terms of comedy talent. Just last week, actually, at Punchline's Comedy Club in St. John, Just for Laughs actually came to record an album there using lots of the Maritimes' top talent. And again, you know, comedians like Lynn Woods and Chanel Frere, you know, all just doing blistering, you know, incredible sets being recorded for. So I feel like the scene. But all of that said, when I moved, and I talk about this, when I first performed in New Brunswick on a visit here in 2009, I think there were 3 comedians in the province, and now I would say there's upwards of 40 in New Brunswick alone, and so I mean probably across the Maritimes you could say over 100. But I guess the solution is that people are doing it themselves. And this was actually something which, and I think I mentioned this in the book, where Catherine Ryan, the extremely successful Canadian comedian in England, she originally from Sarnia, and lived in Toronto for a bit, but went to England and has become one of England's hugest stars. I was just reading her autobiography actually this morning. It's called The Audacity, and it's wonderful. And again, I guess it's interesting with two people that did opposite things. You know, she left Canada, moved to England, and found happiness, and I did the opposite. But she was one of the only people that when I said I was moving here, a lot of Canadian comedians said to me, that will be tough. Like there's, you know, the comedy scene in Canada is dead, and if you're on the East Coast, there'll be nothing. But she was the only person that kind of said to me, do it your own way. Go there, and she said there's an underground scene, there's an independent scene. Do it yourself. And so really, it's a very grassroots and organic approach, which is why, you know, I think when people here more than ever, like I've always find it weird when people criticize comedians and say they're not funny. And of course, I mean, there are plenty of people here, often other comedians here saying that about me. But I find it very, very odd, because I feel like with stand-up comedy, it's like, well, you might not like that thing, but if they are making a room full of people laugh, then you cannot say it's not funny. And again, in other parts of the world, in Hollywood, and there are shortcuts. There are ways that people can cheat their way ahead through contacts and connections. You can't do that here. I cannot cheat an audience into laughing. Either if people are buying a ticket, coming to, and very kindly coming to a show, if they laugh and they enjoy it and want to come again, then job done. So yeah, I find it weird when people say, "Oh, well, that comedian's not funny." Well, you mean you don't like them, right? Yeah.
You are obviously very funny, but I think one thing any artist, comedian, but any type of artist could learn from you is just how hard you work. You really do put the work in. I was delighted to get an email from you last night because you're filming a kid's show. I've always wanted you to come in and sit down for an interview. You said, "Listen, I got the morning off tomorrow, so I can come in." And so, of course, you're working.
This isn't work. This is fun. And I've always wanted to be here as well. And again, thank you. It's one of the amazing things about the Maritimes, the fact that I've being able to email you last night, and the fact that you were like, "Yes, we can do this." It's the can-do approach.
But I would also like to touch on the fact that, the pandemic threw comedians, musicians, comedians just the same, though, this curveball of how do you do your living when you don't have the opportunity to have an audience the same way. And obviously, I'm going to hold the book up for the audience at home that you can order on Chapters Indigo.
Yeah.
I know in St. Andrews, it's at Nevermore Books. La Boline
that's
and
it.
Kolchak.
Yes, and it's going to be at Kolchak soon. And of course, I'm doing that a wonderful event with Heather from Kolchak, and we're going to be talking about the book live. But yes, all of those stores.
And that's June 17th right here at W.C. O'Neill Arena.
It is. It's going to be super fun. I can't wait.
But what was that pivot like for you to realize? I know at first so many of us thought, I know doing the COVID-19 updates, like, this might be 2 months. Wow.
Right.
And then turn around 2 years later. When did you start writing this, and how did you approach pivoting to make your craft work at a very strange time?
Good question. It's I'd started writing it maybe 6 months before. So I guess that's one fortuitous thing, is that probably if COVID hadn't happened, I don't know if it would be finished by now. So it definitely helped with that. But now looking back, of course, there were terrifying times. Those first few weeks when things were being postponed, and again, it seems ridiculous. Like, I remember the day after that Friday the 13th of March 2020, I was supposed to be at the Imperial Theatre the following day, and I'm like, well, why can't this happen? It was a show I've been building for 3 years, and suddenly it couldn't happen. And it was weird that we then postponed it to June. And it was like, well, that should be safe. And then June got moved to December. And then December we were told had to be distancing. So we moved the one show to 4 shows, distancing and masked. Then it got cancelled because we went into a lockdown. And it eventually happened 2 weeks ago, or about a month ago. So yeah, it was 2 years. You and I, of course, also experienced the Canada Day event at Kira at the Kingsbury Garden, where we had a distanced audience of maybe 20-30 people, plus live streamed to everyone in Charlotte County. And that was the day that I realized the vast reach of you and CHCO, when I have really never felt famous in my life, and yet the only time I got an inkling of what it might be like to be Tom Cruise was walking down Water Street after the live stream from the Kingsbury, when seemingly everyone in St. Andrews watched it. I have never felt more like the king. I'm high-fiving people. It was wonderful, and that was an interesting one, because that was one of the only instances where I was performing for an audience in the room and an audience at home at the same time. I did it one other time actually for a St. John Regional Hospital fundraiser at Shadow Lawn in Rosse, but mostly I've been doing virtual gigs or drive-ins. So drive-ins were fun but tough, and necessary but tough. Like, I would say that's something which obviously I would love to do a drive-in show again if the audience were outside of their cars, but it was very tough going by the honks and the horns. But the virtual gig thing I have grown to love. And it's become a thing. Like, obviously virtual was born out of COVID and out of necessity, and it was a compromise, and it was we can't do it in person, so we're doing this. Now it's become just another option. So, for example, I've been doing a lot for different, like I did RBC Manitoba last week. So it was every RBC bank teller in Manitoba. Now, that was not going to be an in-person event. They were not going to give everyone the day off and and book a huge hall and have 1,500 people and fly me in. But they are going to say on Staff Appreciation Day, come in at 8:30, we've got a comedian booked, here are some donuts, and he's going to do a live show. I'm doing one tomorrow for New Brunswick nursing homes. So that was, it's basically a different art form. And then I've done I did Frederickson Playhouse last year, distancing with masks, which I thought was going to be tough, but actually the audience brought 4 times the noise, so it was fun. And then I'm back there this Friday at full capacity. So there were scary times, it was tough, but definitely what's come out of it has been wonderful, and I think the virtual thing will carry on forever.
And it will hold up your poster for your next, you will be coming back to full audience show at Kira August. So is this part of the Canadian Dream Tour?
It is indeed. So basically, yeah, it's the same show, it's the Becoming Canadian show that I did at the Imperial Theatre, that I did doing at the Fredericton Playhouse this Friday. I'll be telling stories from the book. Ethan Ash will be joining me back from the UK, and the show culminates with a story about you, which I can't give away, but it's very much a celebration of you and all that you've done. And I know everyone watching at home, I'm sure, has thanked Vicki in the streets or in the coffee shop or anywhere else you bumped into it for her services to journalism and to all of us through the last 2 years. But you were the voice of reason, you were the voice of balance, and CHCO became the place that everyone came to for sensible COVID updates. So I won't spoil the joke at the end, but it's a celebration of you, and every time I do it, it's wonderful because there's always whoops and cheers when I say your name.
Oh, well, this is my Canadian dream, definitely. What is yours ultimately? How do you describe the Canadian dream?
Good question. I suppose the Canadian dream is really any one of us that is living in it could be a small town or a big city, but basically living in a place in Canada where you get to go through your day without fear of meanness, without cynicism rising up in you. And there's always going to be times that does happen, but I just feel like generally I go through my day, and even if I do start to feel down, suddenly someone will smile at you and say hello, and suddenly you feel, suddenly that goes away. And I feel like that's such a Canadian thing, that really just living in a place where you feel like you can knock on your neighbour's door and say, I need a ride somewhere, and they're going to do it for you. But I mean, for me personally, my dream, my dream was always to be living a life like this, and now I have it, and it's and so when people ask what's next, it's like, well, the dream is to sustain this, because that's hard enough. I feel like the biggest mistake people make in life is constantly looking for the next thing, like what's the next thing. But when you've found happiness, surely the hardest thing is to sustain it. So my dream isn't to perform on Vegas or being out on Salem movie. My dream is that in 30 years time, people still are willing to kind of come and see me perform at the Algonquin, or here at the arena or wherever else. Like just people. That's the dream, to still be doing this, and so that's what I pray every day, is just to sustain days like today.
I think what is beautiful about you and your life and your family is that a lot of people sometimes think, and it's a Canadian thing, to think, oh, maybe you make it here because you can't make it elsewhere. Well, you made it somewhere else. You were a director at British GQ. Your wife was a publishing director at Monocle, which is, I came from a magazine background, full praise for both of those publications. But you let that go. You walked away, and you are both doing together. I'm going to hold this up, and I think most people know, but Maritime Edits, the magazine you're doing here. So you're taking these international magazine skills, bringing them here, and doing something about us, not just for us, but to show how beautiful this part of the world is to the rest of the world. Why is that important to you, to do a magazine at this point in time, in this place and time?
Yeah, because it's interesting, because it definitely wasn't part of the plan. Like when we moved here, the plan was very much to kind of for Pam to carry on working for people she worked for back in the UK, and I definitely I remember when I left GQ, I said that I will never ever one of the things that I hated doing was chasing high-res pictures. Like, I'm sure, you know, you guys may have a similar thing where you get sent a low-res picture and you realize that it's not big enough. And it used to be the bane of my life. And I said, I will never, ever chase another high-resolution picture. And now I do it every day. In fact, I've already chased about 3 this morning, right? But I think it was definitely born out of, like, I wouldn't say a frustration, but like a disappointment that such a thing didn't exist. Like, why does the rest of Canada not know how wonderful it is here? Why do people here not have something they can be proud of, they can sit and look at, that tells them all the things that are happening? So really it was like, we basically created the thing that we wanted to read. Like, we sat around, you know, we did not have a magazine about this place that we had chosen to call home. And so decided to create it. So it was one of the things that Pam had said when we moved here, but she said, anything doesn't exist, we're not going to complain it doesn't exist, we're going to do it. So, and that really was the mantra that we went by. If something doesn't exist that you want to exist, create it. And it was, yeah, to shine a light on this region, both internally and externally, and to show people across the rest of the country, this is why you should come here. But also, yeah, to give people here, A, something to be proud of, but B, yeah, to know what's going on. Because, I mean, we would go out of our way to find out things that were happening, but people would always say, how did you hear about that event? And it was like, oh, well, and that's why it's called Edit, is we do the edit. We'll do the edit for you, we'll find out what's happening, and we'll do the edit. But one of the best theories that I've been told by someone recently was that they said, is it called Edit because it's tied backwards, reversing tide. Anyway, and it isn't that, but genius. Yeah. So maybe one day I'll start pretending that that's why we called it it. But yes, it's an interesting thing that you say about when people, you know, find happiness or find a calling in a smaller place, because people often use that phrase, which I find highly offensive phrase, where they say, you know, big fish, small pond. And really, it's a way for people to kind of demean what you've achieved, as if, oh, well, it's easier to do that in a smaller place. But the reality is, in many ways, I mean, it's harder because there isn't a system, and you are literally having to forge it yourself. But also, it's that thing where, well, if it was so easy, why isn't everyone doing it? Right, you know, and it's funny whenever someone says that to me. It says, "Oh, you're big fish, small pond." It's well, no, I wouldn't put it like that, because if it really was as easy as that, then every single person in the world would be, every single comedian would be leaving London and moving to Rothesay, New Brunswick, and so far they're not.
You've definitely made it in the big pond too, and I think I speak on behalf of all Maritimers when I say we're happy you're here. Thank you so much for coming today, James, and I hope you will be back again soon. I
would love to. I'm so glad we finally got to do this, and it's an honor to be in it. And everyone watching home, it's literally as cool in here as it looks on TV. So thank you, Vicki. Appreciate you very much. Cheers.
My guest today has been James Mullinger, comedian, author, and publisher. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.